Again, the power of truly being heard and seen and valued can tap into pools that we may not even know exist.
Because I think you could leave almost any conversation that you've ever had and think, how did I do?
So if I'm trying to listen, what are the things that are taking me away from doing that?
Welcome back to Unapologetic Rabble-Rousers. I'm DocShellie.
And I'm Carla. We're carrying on with our topic of listening. And today it's going to be about developing those skills.
Building that listening muscle.
Okay. So how are we going to do that?
It's a challenge.
But there are ways. We have some suggestions.
Yeah, I know that self-reflection, which we've talked about a lot in many episodes, is really powerful here. Because I think you could leave almost any conversation that you've ever had and think, how did I do? Literally ask yourself that after you leave any conversation. How many times did I interrupt that person? How many times did I think about what I was going to have for lunch? How many times did I think about, I can't wait till this conversation ends? Because we all have those conversations. So I think self-reflection is really important, particularly when you're in conversations that matter to you and you find yourself checking out or you find yourself interrupting. Take those moments to self-reflect and think where you could have paid more attention, where you could have been a better listener, and how that might have impacted the outcome of the conversation.
I think another piece of the pattern to be able to assess is what are the conditions under which we experience a departure from the behavior that we want to be exercising. So if I'm trying to listen, what are the things that are taking me away from doing that? Is it outside influence that's moving me off of the track of being a good, respectful listener? Is it inside influence? Is it truly that I'm just uncomfortable, either physically or with what's being discussed? What are those items that trigger a departure from an effective listening posture and approach?
Right. You know, as you're asking that question, I very early on in my coaching career, I can't even say it was very early on. It was for a long time. I would get really uncomfortable when people would cry in coaching sessions because I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh God, why are you crying? What's happening right now? And I remember somebody, I believe it's Brene Brown, who said people cry when it's important. People cry when it matters to them. And I thought, okay. It helped me stay in conversation with people, even if there were tears that were showing up. Because then I knew, okay, this is important to this person. I don't need to know why it's important to the person. I just need to sit and listen and let them have a moment. I might, if I'm in person, I might reach over and hand them a Kleenex or just move a box of Kleenex over to them. Or depending on how heavily the person's crying, may say, do you need a minute? But then I can check back into the conversation, but I can sit and listen to them without being in my head going, oh God, why is this person crying? What did I say? What did I do? How did I trigger? It's not my fault that they're crying. So it was a really interesting way to think about the impact that you have, particularly as a coach, being able to just sit with somebody who's having an emotional reaction to something that they're sharing.
It feels also that when we get into a transaction, a communication between two people, and there is that sense of, oh my gosh, I'm really being heard. This person is really listening to me. And that means so much to me that I give myself permission to go deeper than I might have. Again, the power of truly being heard and seen and valued can tap into pools that we may not even know exist in that from the emotional point of view, but the permission to step into that pool.
Yeah, my friend Roseanne is an amazing listener. She stays with you in conversation. She never hijacks a story. And she's so curious that she's great at paraphrasing what you said and then going deeper and asking more questions. And we will go out to dinner, and I don't see her very often, but we'll go out to dinner, and I always feel so bad at the end of the night, 'cause I'm like, I feel like I did all the talking. And she says, no, this was great. I loved our conversation. And I'm like, but I didn't get anything out of you. I felt great. I felt like I was just in the best therapy session I've ever had. But she's such a great listener that it's almost hard to flip the script and start to ask her the questions and have her get the opportunity to share what's going on in her life and her stories. It's kind of funny. And it's so natural to her. It's amazing. But she's a fantastic listener. But every time I walk away from a conversation with her, I was like, whoa, she gets me.
And that's such a special feeling when you can be in that kind of an engagement and just know that not only does that person get me, they respect me, they care. And what kind of a gift is much better than that?
I know, right? And I think some of the things that she does are worth kind of pulling out of that, are that ability to stay in story with somebody. How many times have you started to share a story and then somebody goes, ooh, I can one up that. I got a better one. I got a funnier one. I have a sadder one.
Or here's my story that makes it possible for me to relate to your story. So I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to tell you my story, even though it's really your story that we should be focused on.
Yeah, I did that. It's kind of funny because as I have told this story, everyone was like, I don't see anything wrong with what you did. And I said, I see something wrong with what I did, and I know I could have done better. So I used to work with a woman, and she happens to be a Black woman. Her and her husband were walking across a parking lot at a store, and somebody yelled some profanities to them and told them to go back to their country. She was born here. He was born here. They are American. They are in their country. And she's a small, short, petite woman, and she was like, I'm ready to fight. And her husband's getting in the car. And as she was telling this story, my heart just broke for her because I hate that people have to hear those things. And I said, I experienced something similar, and I proceeded to share my story. And then it became about me because she says, oh my gosh, you're white. Like, I'm so sorry that you had to deal with something like that. And we carried on the conversation for quite some time. And a day or two later, I came back to her and I said, I am so sorry about that conversation we had the other day. Here's what I wish I would have said. I am so sorry that happened to you. Are you okay? And she said, I didn't really think anything about it, but yeah, that would have been a different conversation. I said, I totally hijacked the story. And I didn't do it with any malintent. I simply wanted you to know I kind of understand what you're going through, not to that level, because I know you face that every single day and I do not. I've had a couple experiences in my life. You experience it every single day. But I wanted you to know I get you, I see you, and I could have done it so much better. And I apologize for that.
Being aware of not so much that we have intentions that are bad.
Right.
When we're saying, oh, let me meet you where you are. I got one to share with you. But recognize that that's what we're doing. I love the term hijacking.
Yeah.
I don't love that it happens.
Right.
I don't love that I am complicit in that.
Right.
Since you first shared that story with me years ago, it has influenced how I interact with people who they've had a moment, they've had something that's happened, and where I might have said, let me prove to you that I understand what you're talking about. And go into my story. I've had something that feels like it might feel similar, and so it's with that in mind that I ask you, how are you? What is it that we could talk about or talk through, rather than let me one up you?
Yeah. And when you're sitting around in a circle of friends and you're all just swapping stories, like, that's cool and that's super fun. So that's not what we're talking about here. Mm-mm. We're talking about just in conversation, one-on-one, or with a small group of people, and someone's sharing something. and it's not one of those story swapping kind of times, and you hijack their story because you have a better one, a funnier one, a sadder one. I can one up you, or you're coming at it from really good intent of, I want to relate to you. I want you to know I too have had that. It does not matter in that moment. You can share that story another day. Let them have that story and sit with them in it and ask some questions. Are you okay? What else happened? Can I help? Is there anything I can do? What if that happened again? What would you do next time? Ask some questions. Get curious. It not only gives them that story, but it will improve your relationships.
Yes. And we're demonstrating empathy and understanding, and we're providing support with that. With encouragement and shared strength and the opportunity to just feel safe in that moment and in that story. And that there's somebody who gets it. And you may want to explore that another time.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So hijacking someone's story. Do you see it happening around you? Do you feel it happening to you? How about, do you do that? Do you see yourself engaging in that? Just check what's going on inside of you when it feels like this is about what's going to happen. Why? And to the point of self-reflection, understand what are the motivations, where's it coming from? Why does it feel so important for you to do that? Or is it that's how you handle your disquiet with the fact that somebody else is having a challenge or experienced an ugly incident?
Yeah, and oftentimes it doesn't come from a place of malintent, but we can do better. Mm-hmm. And that's the key thing, is recognizing I didn't mean any malintent. I wanted to connect. I can connect differently and still be in your story.
And I'm wondering if that doesn't lead us to another idea about understanding how we listen.
Listening to understand.
Or listening to disagree.
Yes. I heard a great saying, and I wish I could remember whose concept this was, but they talked about listening, that it's not just about understanding. It's about, are you willing to listen to be influenced, and are you willing to listen to be transformed? And I thought, wow, that's a lot more powerful than listening to understand. Listening to understand is great. And if you don't have that ability yet, work on that first. But I thought you really have to have an open mind to be willing to listen, to be influenced and transformed. That's a really cool place to be. I would say that my friend Roseanne lives in that space. Mm-hmm. Probably 100% of the time.
So another part of what you were just discussing had to do with the developing the understanding and using paraphrasing. So the question you had asked me was, as we were preparing for this part, can you paraphrase back to the person you're listening to what it is that they just said? And why might you want to do that? And one of the first reasons would be to demonstrate that, yeah, you're listening, but you also understand what it is that's being said. It's interesting, just a little bit off topic, that in AI, with all of the marvelous work that's going on.
Artificial intelligence, for those of you that don't know what AI is yet.
Thank you. And again, tongue in cheek, I was in the chat window. I said, I'm just so struck by the fact that many of the pre-prompts that are ways to help chat GPT and other AI tools learn more about what it is you want is the please, thank you, and that was great, and this is where I'd like to go next. And I just made a comment in the chat box saying, I giggle every time, because I write please and thank you as I'm talking to Chat GPT, and I giggle every time I do. And they said, well, remember, we are training AI right now. Yeah. And so we want to train it to know that we're nice people in case, well, who knows where this is all going to go. But anyway.
I say thank you to Siri after I ask her a question on my phone, so I get it. It's kind of ridiculous. I think one of the other things when we think about listening to understand, and you mentioned the paraphrasing, don't be a parrot. Do not repeat back to me exactly what I just said, unless you're quoting me. That kind of drives me batty, because you heard what I said, but did you understand it? Did you kind of internalize and think about what I meant by what I said? And when you can put it back in your own words, then somebody may feel, oh, you get me, you heard me. We can carry on the conversation now, versus just parroting back or citing back exactly what was said.
You can usually hear that with a bit of disdain.
Yeah, yes.
And that doesn't get anyone anywhere.
Yeah.
So we've talked about things to consider. And one of the exercises you brought up was asking for feedback. You want to practice your listening skills. You want to practice your paraphrasing skills. Ask for feedback.
I love feedback. Feedback's awesome.
So what would I do? So I go out and I ask for some feedback on something that matters to me or doesn't. I don't know. How would you go about it? What would asking for feedback look like? And I know as a coach, you deal with this all the time.
Yeah, so I would urge you to think about who are the people that you communicate with on a regular basis. If you're in the workplace, ask your team. I really want to start working on my listening skills. Can you give me some feedback on how well you think I listen? And in a team setting, some things that you can think about. Does your team often have to come back to you to ask questions on an assignment? Because if they do, you probably weren't listening or paying attention to what they need when you were doling out directions. Are people often asking for clarity? And so these are some of the questions that they can start to really just pay attention to. First of all, are your messages clear? And when people are giving you instructions or coming to you with things, are they coming back to you? Or do you have to go back to them to ask clarifying questions? And not because you didn't get the information you needed, but because you weren't paying attention. Are people saying things to you like, I'm just waiting for you to give me an answer and I stopped talking 5 minutes ago? You have to listen to the previous episode to get that one. But I think if you ask people for feedback that you regularly communicate with, how well do you think I do at listening? They'll tell you. They will tell you. And when you ask for feedback, you have to be kind of humble and you have to be willing to hear the things you don't want to hear. The other thing about feedback is you don't have to believe everything you hear. Take it all in, do your own internal assessment, take what is worth keeping, and start working on it. So many times with feedback, I might hear, Shelley, you are the best listener I've ever been around, to which I would laugh because I wouldn't think that would be true. But I also might get feedback from somebody that says, boy, you interrupted me 32 times in 5 minutes. I know that I interrupt people, so I'll take that feedback and I'll work on it. I might get feedback that says, you talk too fast. I've worked on really slowing my speech down for a long time. So I might go ask other people, hey, you were in the same meeting, or you were in the same presentation, or you were in that conversation. Was I talking too fast? What do you think? I'd really love your feedback. Check it out with other people. If you're not sure or you don't agree with it, collect the data and then take what you want and start to make some improvements. Feedback is really good. And I know we talked about, a lot of people say feedback is a gift. And I had a visceral reaction to that. I don't know if we've talked about that yet on the podcast.
Nope.
How many times have you received a gift that you don't like? How many times have you received a gift and you said, thanks, can I have the receipt? I'm going to return that. So I don't think feedback is a gift at all. I think feedback is an opportunity to learn. And that is really a beautiful thing.
A beautiful thing. And worthy of the self-reflection that we continue to bring into the mix, because this is all about being our best self.
Absolutely.
Bringing our best self into every interaction, even as a listener.
Absolutely. I think listening is one of the most underutilized skills. In whether you're a title leader or not, it is one of the most underutilized leadership skills that we have. So you will do yourself a really huge service if you get good at listening. And there's a lot of things that you can do. We've talked about self-reflection, pay attention, stay in people's stories, stop being an interrupter, stay in the game with people. It really matters. It really makes a difference.
Ask for feedback.
Ask for feedback.
I'm Carla.
I'm DocShellie. We'll see you next time. Stay in the game with people. It really matters. It really makes a difference.
Ask for feedback.